Well, good evening and welcome to the Pointbreak Roundtable. My name is Tyler Riley. Tonight, my guests are Ashley Irvin, who is the Women's Discipleship Coordinator, and Mace Perez, who's the Grow Group and Discipleship Director. Laughing because, for whatever reason, could not get that down. But I got it. I got the titles right.
You got it right.
Yes. Know the people. Terrible with anyone's titles, including my own. But thank you guys for being here a ton. Tonight's topic is relationships in a pandemic. So when it comes to Point Break, our motto is 3 parts. It's love God, embrace community, live life to the fullest. And I think our students would agree that one of their favorite ones of that is the community aspect, and really one of the biggest lessons that they learn through it. And one of the biggest lessons that I want them to get through Point Break is, what does it look like to have healthy community? And I feel like, honestly, for us at Point Break, it was at this spot where we were growing a lot and everyone was feeling this sense of community. And then COVID happens and just uproots everyone's lives, really. And I have to remind myself, it's like a global thing. It's not even just here, it's globally. It really just changed life as we know it. And community being one of those, because all of a sudden, nothing's in person anymore. And so the question that I would have, and the thing that I would want, I guess, our students and whoever's listening tonight is to know, is it possible to still have healthy relationships, healthy community, even when nothing's in person? So I'll kind of open it up there. Is it possible?
Well, I think it is. Something I have learned through this whole pandemic, and as we walk through what does community look like for our adults at Faith Bridge, is God has been teaching me where I see obstacle, he sees opportunity. And we even had a virtual women's study that kicked off in the spring, totally unplanned, last minute, but reached an entirely demographic of people than we have reached with our women's Bible study before. And so seeing the way that God brought community, and I think that community he wanted to bring us, we had to shift our perspective too and see it's going to look different. Like, it looks different in this season. We're not in person. It is awkward over a screen. It just takes a little bit more time. But when we can shift our perspective and remember, like, God is bigger than the obstacles that we see in front of us for community.
Yeah, absolutely. And while I do think it's possible, we know that it looks different. And a lot of the things, that we would normally do to build that community just aren't possible, or at the very least look very, very different. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that. I think it's okay to even grieve that. So, for example, like my family, one of the things that we do to try to build community, especially with like our friends, our neighbors, coworkers, is we love having people over to our house for dinner. That's just not possible in this season. And so I think it's okay to acknowledge that. I think it's okay to grieve that. I think the trick is to not let yourself get stuck there. That grieve what you can't do, but then focus on what you can do. So that has looked like a lot of time just for us as a family. That has looked like a lot of phone calls with friends and family members and that sort of thing. Maybe it may not be all that we want to do, but it is amazing, like Ashley was saying, how if we will just put ourselves out there, get over the awkward of the Zoom calls and all that sort of thing, like God can use that and still connect us in genuine and profound ways.
Yeah. And I like what you said about the grieving. That was something that I had to learn. And I think it's probably just kind of the way that I'm wired. But I know initially I was honestly definitely was like, wow, this is weird not being able to see my students and friends and stuff like that. But I also kind of in a weird way enjoyed this working at home. And I was like, this is kind of cool for a little bit. And then I feel like, honestly, probably recently was when I really realized, okay, this season has been very weighty. And I see where that's been even in my own self. And so I'm even learning, and I'd heard people say it all the time, but I'm even learning this whole season of what's happening can affect us in different ways, but it affects us. And really nobody's immune to that. I want to highlight kind of something you said and kind of ask about that in particular. But you had kind of mentioned like the key is not to get stuck there. Do you feel like it's easier to get stuck there than it is to pursue healthy community, like in the current state that we're in?
My initial reaction is it probably depends on your wiring. I think there's some people that are more likely to get stuck there. My natural wiring is more of a problem solver. And so I'm very quick to negate the grieving side, whether it's in my own life or actually a hindrance to community is for me when my wife or a friend is trying to grieve the loss. I'm like, yeah, but let's move on. You can't do that, but you can do this and this. And so I think my guess is it's probably not a one size fits all answer, that we have to learn which way we tend. And if you are the type that can get stuck there, your growth edge is going to be able to, yes, it is healthy to lament that, but let's move on. And if you're the person that jumps too quickly to solutions, let's spend some time in that personal reflection to figure out, in that grieving process. And I think one of the ways, okay, how do we, whatever our growth edge is, how do we do that? I think that is one of the reasons why community is important. So I am more that problem solver. I'll just skip the grieving stage. My wife is very different. I've had to learn the hard way. When I go straight to solutions, that doesn't go well. But because God has put us together who are wired very differently, we are able to complement each other and help each other see those growth edges, so that whichever way we lean and whichever way we need to grow, community helps us see that and to be able to take those steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in a different perspective, I guess, because I am more the sensitive. I want to sit and grieve and feel the emotion of it. It took me a while when I started in this season to not just sit in it and say, I'm going to hunker down and survive, because I think we've come through so many months of this and figuring out, okay, now I have to adapt my lifestyle to this and figure out how am I going to learn to thrive when I'm at home every single day and I'm not seeing my coworkers, I'm not seeing my friends, I'm not seeing a group together. But what does it look like to seek out that community in a digital way, or even just the people that you get to be with in your house, which can be even harder. But learning how to adapt to grieve through it, but also not just hunker down and survive, because I can very much be in that vein of like, let's just figure out how we can make it through, even if I'm barely limping to the end. But how can we actually thrive in this? Because I think that is where God is leading us, at least me in this season, is figuring out what do I do to make myself the best I can be through pandemic. So
yeah. I think in this season, for me, one thing that I'm noticing, I think when it comes to this topic in relationships and community and that sort of deal, that it's so interesting. I believe that God is the opposite of the enemy, or Satan. Satan is the opposite of God. And so if God desires for us to live in community and to not walk through life alone, then also you look at the opposite of that and the enemy desiring for us to be isolated and complacent with that, which is a topic that we've talked about. And so, I guess the question that I would have is, for somebody who may be watching or listening to this today, and they're kind of feeling like, oh, I think I have been pretty complacent in being isolated. How would somebody kind of rattle out of that? What are some practical steps that person can take to getting some healthy community, to getting some healthy relationships, even in the current state?
I think, coming from my own personal perspective, I can quickly shell up and not be uncomfortable. I don't want anybody to see the ugly mess that's on the inside, but I think that's the beauty of community, is we share the mess together. But for me, it's been being comfortable with being uncomfortable, or not comfortable, but being okay with being uncomfortable. And I think there's a step you have to take to say, I'm willing to open up and not only receive from other people, but also be somebody that's giving to them. I think there's a selfishness that can keep us hold up and not sharing with other people. So I think just taking the step to be uncomfortable and be vulnerable with other people and share, hey, this is hard right now. Or I know that there's a friend that I can talk to that I talk to at school. Maybe I can call her or call him and just say, hey, I'm struggling with something. Could we just talk for 30 minutes? And that's awkward to initiate, but once you get past that step of initiation, a lot of times it becomes more natural. So I think embracing the uncomfortable is a big first step, a scary one, but important.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a little bit more that idea of, like you talked about, it was easy for you on the front end to kind of get stuck there, and then you had to move past that, and you kind of shared that in your answer just now of you kind of had to come to this place of like, okay, I'm going to have to be okay with being uncomfortable. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what helped you get out of that stuck state, or what gave you the courage or the inspiration or whatever it was that you needed.
Yeah. Well, I think my experience is probably different than a lot of people watching, just thinking through even ministry-wise what was happening in the spring. And I think the first couple months of quarantine, I was just like, I'm just going to make it through, like just got to stay in my little shell at home or whatever. But I think for me, seeing the ministry that happened with our women's Bible study, and this was all completely virtual online, like hearing from my leaders, hey, I had this connection. We only had 3 people in our group, but we were able to talk about such deep things. And I've literally never met these women in person. Like these leaders telling me this. And so I think hearing that God was doing all these things, it's like, I know I can't limit God and say that he's not going to do it in this season for me too. And saying it's okay that it's over a screen and it's awkward and you can't read body language sometimes, but you adapt and you learn how to do that. And I think even with my own discipleship group saying, okay, we're going to continue doing this. And it's been great for all of us, I think, pushing through the awkward, and we're seeing God do things. So,
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. For me, I went into, okay, relationships are going to look different. A lot of the people that I'm used to seeing on a regular basis, I'm not going to see, but I know that I need community. Like, that's my job, is to make sure that the adults of Faith Bridge have community and getting connected in community. So, I'm deeply, like, that's a deep conviction of mine. And so I pretty immediately, maybe it's that problem-solving nature, just again went into, okay, what will I do to make sure that I'm going to have that? And I would say for me, where that started was in the home. Like you referenced, working from home. And so, me, like many others, I'm spending 90+% of my work time at home. And it certainly does present some challenges when you have a couple parents trying to work from home. We have a son who was doing the online learning thing at home and all that sort of stuff. So it certainly presents its challenges, but like Ashley was saying earlier, it also presented those opportunities that we got to go on walks almost every day as a family. We have dinner most nights of the week together. My wife gets to have lunch with our kids every day of the week. And so for me, that's where it started, was realizing of, hey, I am probably going to get more potential for family time during this season than I might ever have. So how will I take advantage of that? And there's no one right way to do that. For us, we enjoy going on walks together. Or we were talking before the recording started about one of our traditions is a family movie night, and making sure that we were prioritizing those things. And so, to whoever is listening to this, I would say, you don't have to copy what any one of us is necessarily saying, but, presumably, you live at home with someone else, whether it's parents or siblings or grandparents or whoever it may be. And, the Bible even talks about how we are in those families by the sovereign will of God. And we know that he is sovereign over our families. We know that he is sovereign over the situation. So it just may be that one of the places where God wants us to find community and deepen our community is with the people that we live with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you both kind of hit on this when you're talking about, especially just taking the opportunity that this presents. There's been several times where I've even thought to myself, I'm like, okay, we're all pretty ready for the situation, the circumstances to change. We miss what we viewed as normal. But I do think looking down the road, there is going to be a time where we look back and say, in a weird way, I missed that because of the opportunities that it brought. And so I love that y'all are talking about capitalizing on those opportunities, because the reality is we still have a chance to do that now.
Yeah.
And just sitting around and just waiting for the circumstances to change before you take action, you're missing those opportunities.
Yeah.
And eventually you're gonna wish, man, I wish I would have taken hold of those opportunities. So even just me sitting here, I'm encouraged by you two of y'all saying, okay, got to this point where we realized this is an opportunity and begin capitalizing on it and really seeing how can I connect more with my family? How can I connect more with my roommates, which for me was a big part of this season. And I kind of told you, I enjoyed working from home. And then I became this I just kind of stayed in my own area and realized I was missing so many opportunities with my roommates. And so now I'm trying to take steps in that and make up some time there because they do such a great job at it and I was not. And so I couldn't, I couldn't agree more with that action step. And I hope that our students would just see, or whoever's listening or viewing, that just sitting and waiting for the circumstances to change isn't the answer. Mm-hmm. The answer is realizing the opportunity that you have right now to live in healthy relationships, even with people that you may have never taken steps toward a healthy relationship with it, even if it's your own family, like your parents and your siblings and things like that. So I'm leaving this table very encouraged by you two and have always just been appreciative of the work that y'all have done to make sure that there is healthy community and discipleship and things that are taking place here. And I've very greatly valued your input. So thank y'all so much for being here.
Yeah,
glad to be here.
And thank you for being here as well and tuning in. We'll be back next Sunday night for another roundtable. We're going to have another student roundtable. So you're not going to want to miss that one. But until then, have a great rest of your week and we'll see you right back here next Sunday night at 7.